Hey everybody, I hope you're all doing well out there. Um, it's like day 333 of self-isolation. Um, I'm starting to really feel it, like all of the signs and everything are saying we're also going to lose the month of April, that this self-isolation is going to be ongoing. Uh, Pretty cold, overcast day today. Yeah, and I'm starting to feel it, starting to feel that the effects of this isolating kind of thing. Feeling a bit lonely, right? Digital contact with other people is, it is what it is, but it doesn't quite replace the real thing. I do still have my little boy, my good little man. I saw something the other day that really stuck in my head that the last couple of days I've been really chewing over, and I don't know how to process it. And I've been following the Bernie Sanders campaign for quite some time, and if you pay attention to the Bernie Sanders campaign, it reveals a lot of the terribleness, a lot of the terror that exists in the American democratic system. It completely exposes the kind of like just go out and vote lie. The Democrats are never going to allow a progressive leader to come in and run their party. It's never going to happen that way. They've shown explicitly that they're willing to rig elections, to steal the election from Bernie Sanders. They kept polls open during this coronavirus pandemic, for goodness sakes. Like, it's you just take a look at the exit polling. The discrepancies between the exit polling and the results are such that, like, America has used the discrepancies found there as justification for invasion of other countries, for goodness sakes. Like, we're talking about a rigging. But one of the talking points that has come out of this conversation is that older black voters didn't vote for Bernie Sanders. They voted for Joe Biden. And I saw an interview on The Hill, Crystal Ball. I really think people should pay attention to Crystal Ball. She's sharp and she really knows what she's talking about, and she hasn't been corrupted yet. And I'm completely blanking on the name of the individual they had. He was a black professor. He was very energetic, very ecstatic. I'm completely blanking on his name, but he said something that really, when he said it, it really punctured me. It really struck me, and then now it's really stuck with me, and I don't quite understand how to process it myself. He said that black voters didn't vote for Bernie because they don't trust government, they don't trust institutions in the first place, and they don't believe that any white man is going to pass legislation that would benefit them. If anything, they would pass this legislation and then purposefully exclude the black population, because that's what they've always done. And the thing that really stuck with me is when he said, right now the conversation that's going on in black communities is whether or not white people are born evil or whether that evil is trained in them. And that really gave me pause. That really made me stop and think for a moment. Because unless you're an absolute craven, unless you're absolutely a denialist and you don't want to accept that reality exists and is in front of you, you understand what's gone on in the black community and what the white population has done to the black community. You understand, like, not even the extremity of black slavery, which wasn't that long ago. And then the evolution into the Jim Crow laws, and then the evolution of the federal penitentiary system, which is just an extension of slavery in the United States. The ghettoization of the black communities, the wholesale abandonment of black communities by white people. You go and listen to some of Malcolm X's speeches and you see how relevant they are even today. And there's always been this kind of hope that, I guess it's a naive hope for me, that there has been a coming together, but I feel like more and more, I talk very widely and very loudly about propaganda and how corporations and the powerful want to create illusions, right? Like, they want to create the illusion that they support democracy, but they don't, right? If the democracy suddenly starts to work against their interests, then suddenly democracy needs to be subverted at every possible stage. And I feel like the same thing has happened here, where there's this facade of diversity, right? We have this kind of facade of support for black communities, and we have this facade of support for black people, and this sort of diversification of our media and the diversification of all of that. But really, we more and more come to see that it's just another veil, it's just another facade for the corporate state and the corporate media and the military-industrial complex to sort of pretend as though they're evolving, but what really it looks like is this position that we'll just look like we care. That's really what it is. It's like when someone like Jeff Bezos donates like $25 million to something, right? That's like a quarter. That's just like attempting to look like you care. But you don't. Not really. It's not really something that they could care. They could give two craps. Like, they just want people to be back to work. They don't care how many of them die. They're replaceable, right? They're replaceable workers. And so this question really plagues me. This question of like, yeah, is white culture naturally evil, or are we trained to be this way? Because it's difficult to create a case that white culture is has a moral center. It's very difficult to create that case. You just need to take a look at, I mean, not even old history, like fairly recent history. Things are centered around this sort of white supremacist position, and the capitalist death cult uses white supremacy for their own benefit, and uses white supremacy as a method to maintain power and control. And I think that has more to do with it than anything. I think that when you start to think that the ultimate goal for many people is wealth, because wealth brings power and status, well, then one of the tactics that is deemed acceptable then, when the goal is to accrue wealth, is to create gangs. And a white gang, right? A white supremacist gang is going to have a great deal of wealth in the first place, and then is able to exclude other gangs based on their based on skin color. It's an effective strategy. It's an effective tool. This is why you have like Malcolm X really coming down on the white moderate, because the white moderate benefits from white supremacy, and benefits from organizations like the Ku Klux Klan, and benefits from these people who are taking extreme positions in order to defend white moderate life, and the black population, especially someone like Malcolm X, understands that the white moderate is not the ally of the black people. And so it seems like, and then it seems as though there's this sort of influx, right? Like we're shown lots of black people in our media. Just yesterday, I finally watched Avengers Endgame, and there was this moment right near the end. Spoilers, I'll spoil the whole thing, where Captain America handed his shield to the Falcon, who's played by a young black actor, and there was this real sense that it was this young black actor who was going to take up the mantle of Captain America, and that there was like a handoff, and it was like an old white man handing off the mantle of Captain America to a young black man. And that's a nice image, and I do think it is well meant, but it has this kind of out of touchness to it, and this kind of it's just for show. I think it really is what it is that even if it is well meant, it is for show, because you can say that you want peace between these two groups as much as you want. You can say that you want these two groups to come together and form a kinship and an alliance. You can say that all you want. But the reality is that when it comes time to act, when it comes time to do something in order to benefit not even just black people, but all people, including black people, that white culture purposefully goes out of its way to exclude black people from the conversation. And it's done it over and over and over and over and over again. That still the culture views the black community as slaves and as second-class citizens. And it's deeply unfortunate. And it's something I want to believe, as, you know, a middle-aged white man, that this is a learned behavior. I want to believe that the white population is sort of caught up in this capitalist death cult and this sort of mania and this manic pursuit of wealth. And in this manic pursuit of wealth, it formulates strategies in order to maintain that wealth. And recently it has been willing to diversify its racial profile at the highest levels. But that is just, but only to those who pledge fealty to this corporate death cult and to the wealth accumulation. And that does not help the mass of people at all. Individuals can ascend this sort of social hierarchy that we're told is good, but the people who cannot do that, they're sort of left behind. And by sort of, I mean they definitely are left behind. They're told that, you know, you can't have clean drinking water if you live in a black community. You're told that you can't. If you're a black person in America, you know people who have gone to jail. You have friends and family who are in jail. It's just that fact alone fundamentally alters how you perceive the world around you. I don't know anybody who's been in jail. Not a single person. And so there's that great divide that exists. And I'm supposed to kind of pretend. I've always been told that it's up to the individual, but the systemic nature of it is you have to be delusional to not see it in front of you. And I feel like as I'm talking about this, I am dancing around that kind of fundamental question, because it's hard for me to look at, it's hard for me to want to face, and it's hard for me to want to grapple with and struggle with. Are white people naturally evil? Or are we trained to be that way? I think that I look back on my own history of who I was when I was younger and how I was raised, what my training was, and what my programming was. And as I've gotten older, I have broken out of that programming. I have found my own ways through things. And I do think that it is taught. I do think that it is taught. I think that it's not a natural thing. I don't think that that is something, it is, it is a natural thing, but only insofar as it exists in all of humanity. I don't think that that is something that we can divide into specific racial groups. I think that everybody is afflicted with sort of the same desires for greed and for wealth and prestige. They just manifest themselves in different ways depending on your status or depending on your situation. That you can't, humans themselves are humans as a group. All humans have this internal fallibility and have this corruptibility. And because we all initially start with our most selfish perspective. We start by only being able to perceive through our own consciousness. And there's no method by which we are trained to do otherwise. It's something that we have to learn, and it's something that we have to teach, and it's something we have to focus on and work at. You have to work on it. You do. It's something that you really do have to work to try to achieve, to be able to take the perspective of the other person, to be able to take the perspective of someone else, maybe even someone you despise. And so I think that the natural argument, the argument that white culture is naturally evil, that white people are naturally evil, well, I mean, I think there's some truth to it, but only insofar as everyone is capable of that everyone I don't think that it is an exclusively white phenomenon. I just think that white culture is the predominant and most powerful culture at the moment. And that if that were to shift to another race or to another group, that would become obvious, because that other group would also have its own internal failings, and it would also have its own acts that we would consider objectively evil, because that's humans for you. So on the issue of it being taught, it is certainly taught. It's certainly taught. And it's certainly learned, and it's certainly built in the exclusionary idea. My perspective was never, I was raised in a small rural community that was primarily white. And so my first brush-ups with other races was not with the black community, but it was with the First Nations communities that existed around my small community. And those First Nations communities were struggling with their own problems and their own difficulties, the history of which I was completely uninformed of. I mean, if you're not taught about the 60s scoop, the 60s scoop alone, forget everything else. Like, the 60s scoop alone, like, while my parents were building businesses and working with their communities in order to try and forge a way forward for themselves, I mean, First Nations people were having their doors kicked in and having their children stolen from them. Like, it's not difficult to see, like, why is there so much strife in these First Nations communities? I mean, they had a mass kidnapping happen to them, inflicted upon them by the RCMP, by the Catholic Church. Like, it doesn't take a genius to figure out what's going on there. I'm running out of time here, so I think I'm just going to close by saying, I think it is taught. I think it's something that we can get out of. It's something that we can teach a different way. We can teach a different path, and we can start by teaching the truth, by talking the truth about what has happened, what has been inflicted upon these communities, whether it's First Nation or the black communities, and we can openly be honest about that history and what has happened. And we need to begin teaching people right at the baseline, right at their inception, right at when they are coming into reality. We need to begin teaching them that everyone is on their own path, that the starting locations for everyone is different, and some people's starting location is both of their parents are millionaires and are in the upper echelons of financially of their society, and some people's starting location is in some rural town where they're living with a single mom who has been abandoned. You know, like, we need to start taking more seriously, and we need to start taking, we just need to take seriously the truth that everyone is not, that everyone has has a different position, and that those positions are not morally based. I think that's the greatest sin of this society, is that we attach moral judgment to things that have no moral judgment. That if I was to use Christian terminology, we are judging things that only God may judge. And I just hope that we can grow and learn and change our perceptions of the world around us. Anyway, that's my time. I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you're isolating. I hope you're staying safe. I hope you're having fun if you can. I love you all.